Hey guys, Khalid from Cricket Fanatics Magazine here with another episode of Legends with Ravi. A very special episode today, and I'm really excited about it because always, every single week, I learn new things and new things about the game. I learn new strategies, I learn new thought processes, I learn about new players. So, this has been quite an educational journey for me. I'm so happy that I've met Ravi and that he's introduced me to so many legends of the game and that we can bring those legends to you too. So, thanks a lot for everybody for tuning in. Before we get started, you know what to do. Click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, put your comments in the comment section below, and share this with all your friends. We want your comments today because we're going to, halfway through the show, towards the end of the show, we're going to ask these questions to our guests today. So without further ado, let me introduce to you to the star of today's show, and that's, of course, Mr. Ravi Reddy. Hello, Ravi. How are you doing?
I've even got the new headset to go with the song. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so you had a special request that I had to make it happen for you. So luckily we were able to do it.
The way I see it, Joey is doing it, Zahir is doing it. Why can't Ravi do it as well? So, in a way, it actually complements Joey in a very strange way because this was actually used as part of Sky Sports' presentation of a West Indies England series many moons ago. Bob Marley featuring Funkstar Deluxe, fantastic song, one of my favorites. They jammed this all night long at Galaxy when the West Indies beat England in 2004 in the ICC Champions Trophy, and I'll never forget that night. But we'll talk about that game a little bit more later down the line. But thanks again, Khalid, for keeping us running.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. And obviously, Bob Marley speaks a great deal for a lot of people that stood up for human rights, etc. And he was an advocate of that, and obviously, so he was an amazing person for that, and he also stood up for that, and that's why Mr. Graham October also is a big fan of Mr. Bob Marley. He's always mentioned it before because of his particular songs, Redemption Song, of course, and Stand Up for Your Rights, etc. So great choice of song there, Ravi. So Ravi, I'm going to give you an opportunity now just to introduce us and introduce me to our guests today, and who's going to be on the show today with us.
Absolutely, and I'd just like to take this moment to acknowledge that we've lost some significant sporting personalities on and off the field and in the commentary box. Very recently, we saw the passing of Kawunda and Chunya, a famous rugby commentator. He covered the World Cup very recently, and many tributes have been provided or passed on in his regard as well. And of course, a week earlier, we lost the centerpiece of the show, if you will, Baboo Ebrahim, who is a fantastic left-arm, unorthodox spinner in his time. He bowled to fantastic county cricket legends, definitely a few Australians that actually visited our shores in the late 70s, early 80s as well. And he managed to pick up some vital wickets there. Very formidable bowler as a spinner, of course, and very well represented in terms of the many testimonials that he got in the form of tributes and condolences passed on in the last couple of weeks, just honoring his memory. So there's clearly some splendid memories with regards to Baboo, and in fact, somebody sent a video. I'll actually refer to the individual's name later on the show, but it showed Baboo actually coaching some youngsters how to play spin in his 70s, which I found I was almost perplexed by that because you don't see that very often. You know, somebody, an elder statesman, actually bowling to some youngsters. I thought that sort of built some character, sort of provided some context as to how great this gentleman was as an individual, as a person. They referred to him very commonly as Uncle Baboo from time to time, and I'm looking forward to getting into it, a discussion with our guests tonight. Some very notable personalities as well.
Yeah. So let's introduce our guest to us. Tell us a little bit more about why you have chosen this particular panel today.
Absolutely. So we mentioned that we were going to bring a friend of the cricket fanatics community, Aslam Khota, back to the show. He's no stranger to the world of cricket, especially in South Africa. Fantastic radio personality, and he has a wealth of knowledge. And he certainly would have seen firsthand what Baboo is capable of on the field as a left-arm unorthodox spinner, removing a very notable, very formidable batsman in the various leagues he's played as well. He'll be joined by Dev Govindjee, who's got quite a big Twitter following from what I've last seen. And he's a match referee for the ICC. He does a lot of his analysis and stuff from upstairs. He's the man in the glass box upstairs that just keeps an eye on proceedings in the game to make sure that nothing pear-shaped happens. I certainly hope there wouldn't be any sandpaper involved in those instances, but he has to keep a very close eye on what's going on off the field. But he's also had the opportunity of playing Baboo firsthand, and can certainly regale and share some of the various encounters he's had with our fallen superstar.
Okay, awesome. So without further ado, let's introduce our guest today to the show. Hi, Dev, and hi, Aslam. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I'm rather privileged to be in the company of the match referee, so I'll watch my step too.
Aslam, thanks so much. Thanks, you guys. It's lovely to be joining you. It's really a pleasure, and particularly to speak to of somebody as renowned as Baboo Ibrahim.
Well, I'd just like to get in here quickly that I'm going to say that I actually recommended Dev Govindjee to be on this particular show, talking about the great Baboo Ibrahim, because he's a contemporary, and who better? And there were a number of choices, but Dev, being so involved in the game all his life, loved the game more than anything else, and Baboo wasn't too different from him. And I think they both left-arm spinners. They come off the same stock. And having played with him, I think he's in the more authoritative position to speak about the man, his career, and of course, what he was all about. And I'll fill in, as I told you, Ravi, that I'll just go with the flow, because I think it's that type of a show today. And clearly, without a shadow of a doubt, we are celebrating today, whilst we mourn him too, but we celebrate one of the finest cricketers that the community of Natal had produced, and of course, even the country.
Cool. So, Ravi, take it away. It's up to you. It's all over to you.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Yeah, so Khalid's going to step out in this particular round here. But one of the pleasures I've had in the last couple of weeks is to educate Khalid on players that I've seen firsthand. And this is a very rare occasion where I actually didn't get an opportunity to see Baboo play. But his legacy certainly lived on, and there were lots of memories shared in the many cricket clubs that I've had the pleasure of playing at. So thankfully, you guys were kind enough to volunteer your time to share your experiences, your stories. Perhaps if we could just maybe start with Dev, maybe just share with us how it is that you were acquainted with Baboo during his time.
Well, during the Sakbok era, we were very blessed that each province basically had some wonderful spin bowlers. And it was always a interprovincial, almost rivalry between us, that Natal would have Baboo. I would be down in the Eastern Province together with Kaya and Jola, and to a lesser extent, Neville Francis. Western Province, following Owen Williams, who was before my time, had the mercurial Lefty Adams. Transvaal to us, for some strange reason, didn't really have a left-arm spinner of note, but they compensated with their off-spinners, the legendary Abdul Latif Barnes, or Tiffy Barnes as we call him. And then they had a prodigious off-spinner called Hira Jairam, who played a few matches for them. They had Miley Kara. So we had a left-arm spinners club, as you could would refer to them. And naturally, with the passing of Baboo, we've lost a valuable member of the left-arm spinners club. And over the years, I've had the pleasure and the privilege of not only playing against him, both at provincial level, and also when we had the North versus South clashes, with which Aslam will tell you a lot about, which is almost our test match, because that was the culmination of your season. You played to get into the North team, or you played to get into the South team. And then off the field, I mean, Baboo Ebrahim was Baboo Ebrahim, and I've got a few quotes from contemporaries, which I will share with you. I've managed to get in touch today with some of these teammates at provincial level, and some of the people he played against. And what comes through without any doubt is the fact that he was a personality of note.
And one thing I've picked up, having heard the many tributes from former players, current players that would have been under his tutelage or under his wing, in a manner of speaking, one thing I've heard that there's a very common reference is that he was quite a difficult bowler, quite a handful. Could you perhaps unpack how difficult it was to face him in those times as a left-arm spinner? Did you, in your opinion, do you think he changed the game up a little bit?
He was more orthodox than unorthodox, I would think, but I was just putting some thoughts to paper, and I said, when you're playing against a team, if Eastern Province are playing Natal, when you look at the team list, you look at certain names. And when you saw certain names, it meant something in your team. And when there's a reaction, it means not necessarily fear, but respect. And so when you saw a name on the Natal team list, Yaqub Omar, Mustafa Khan, when you saw Baboo Ebrahim, the team had to get together because they knew that batsmen are going to be facing one of the spin bowlers in our country. And Baboo might not have turned the ball a lot, but he always said, and I also believe the same, you don't have to beat the bat by much, all right? It is how you use your mind. And Baboo was a thinking bowler. And I've got a quote from his one of his good friends, Mustafa, which I will give to you later. But that was Baboo. He could vary his pace. He could outthink most batsmen. And this is the strength that he had, that he was always at you. He knew what your weaknesses were. He knew your strength, and he'll bowl to that. And therefore, his variety was such that he outwit most of the batsmen. So when you get into a game and you're facing a Baboo Ebrahim and that type of bowler, it means that you've got to be on top of your game, because the margin of error is reduced to almost nil.
Well, Ravi,
So,
if I can
good.
add to what Dev has just mentioned, because it ties up with one or two chats that I had with some of Baboo's contemporaries, Morris Garda, one of them, Munir Saleh. And then I'll start with my uncle, Rafiq Khota, who was 87 years old. And he chatted to me all about Baboo. He heard about his passing. And then obviously I asked a few questions. And he did talk about the fantastic fielder he was, which is what I also tweeted when I just learned about him, because that was one of the memories I have of Baboo, a fantastic fielder at backward point and also gully. And because he was a goalkeeper for Beria Park in the semi-professional leagues, it was no wonder he was so capable of diving all over the place. So he was really something quite special as a fielder. As a bowler from a batting point of view, and I think Dev will also enjoy this, because I spoke to my cousin Munir Saleh, who captained Transvaal and played against him. And he did say that there are many off spinners or many spinners that you play against that you can actually line up. And he says, but Baboo was one of those who you just couldn't do that. And this is what Dev is saying, because he was in your head. He knew what you were about to do or what your strengths were, and he could play at them. And then exactly as Dev has just said, the guy said that when you looked at the Natal team list, everybody says, just don't get out to Baboo, because he's the threat. If you don't fall to him, you're probably going to score 350 runs or maybe even 400. So that's what he said. And then just to mention, I mean, Morris Garda was almost lost for words. First of all, in that losing Baboo was pretty tragic, because they've been speaking to one another. Yunus Randari said the same thing. Kasim Dokrat said the same thing. Mustafa said the same thing, that once he was in bed in hospital a few days before he had passed away, he said, I'm feeling better. So obviously it came as a shock to these guys. But speaking about the men, without a doubt, Maurice Gardner said he was one of the best as he faced left arm spinners that he faced in South African cricket, and that he was obviously a wonderful human being and great company. They all enjoyed that. Kasim Dokrat has said quite a bit about him, which I'll touch on a little later. And then Mustafa Khan spoke about the fact that exactly as Dev again said, that whilst he didn't turn the ball much, there was something that is in the left arm spinner's armory that is so important, and that is that drift, or if you're a leg spin bowler, as we've seen with Warne. And he says that's what this guy was an artist with. He somehow could just adapt to it and get the better of batsmen. And that's possibly what happened on that famous day in that summer of 1976-77 when he got those 6 wickets against the Australians. And yeah, those are just some of the things that I had shared. And then he was certainly a jovial character. And Dev Munir says he was a prankster of note. And he had another nickname too, Zeb Zeb.
I just want to touch on what Aslam has said, because what Mustafa said is, and I quote here, he says he was able to pick up batsmen's weaknesses and strength quicker than most other guys. As a bowler, his nagging accuracy coupled with his ability to vary what he bowled made him dangerous. But I think that his patience, and this is important, I think that his patience is what made him different from lots of other talented bowlers. That is an important quality in a spin bowler that is often forgotten. He was also a naturally fit guy, as Aslam alluded to, and he could bowl the whole day without any problem. And
yeah,
to come to his
looked like a
off-field
machine.
antics. Yes, he was. He was.
Yeah. You look like he's in top shape. He according to Aslam, and I read this as well, he was a goalkeeper for many years, and he's quite agile on the field, from what I understand. So not only was he fantastic as a bowler, but on the field he was quite a demon. Is that correct, Jens?
Yeah, as he was. In fact, I was talking to his son Yasin the other day, and Yasin was actually shocked that first time he's spoken to anyone that remembered that his father was actually a goalkeeper. And it just sort of it clicked in my mind as I was chatting to him, and he was pretty amazed with it. But I remember, and I must share this with you because I did share it with a number of our followers on Twitter, that I saw a lot of Baboo before 1970, that season of 1974, from maybe the early 70s when I was just hitting my early teens, and saw quite a bit of him. But this was a challenge against Rohan Kanhai, one of the greatest batsmen in the world throughout the 60s and early 70s, right? And I mean, that is, I'm not saying it. I've read what the likes of Benaud and a whole lot of others have said that he was great. So he came to South Africa. He was playing against Natal. And before Baboo could bowl or was brought on to bowl, Kanhai had then come in. And he was really playing a typically brilliant innings. And I'll tell you why he had to produce a great innings. Here's this former West Indian captain who's just retired, comes to South Africa, plays for Transvaal, appears for Transvaal in the Dadabai Cup. And Yaqub Umar produces one of the most classic hundreds that we saw at the Lenasia Stadium with Natal batting first. And he was a captain there. And obviously, after Kanhai had witnessed that, he realized that, listen, I'm up against something here because this was top drawer stuff. And he went and obviously produced an absolute gem. But at point and at gully, this fellow was diving all over the place, was Baboo Ebrahim, to his left, to his right, over the top of his head. And without a doubt, I remember that so distinctly because my brother and I were actually, two brothers and I were sitting together, and we were literally at point on that stand where we were watching. And I remember we eventually made the comment that Baboo's probably saved about 20 or 30 runs off the bat of Kanhai. He ended up on 134, and the match ended in a draw as well. But we were entertained, and we saw the best of him then. Of course, 2 seasons later, when that attempt at unity was in place, and I remember somebody on Twitter just commented that it was Richie Banner who said that South Africa will have to, the invitation team will have to have at least 2 to 3 players of color in the team. It wasn't from Benaud. Benaud minded his own business. He was just the manager of the team. It was, in fact, Rashid Farachia, who was pretty much ahead of his time, if you think about it, because he said, if you want this to be part of this growth of the game and the fact that we are now in a call it a new cricketing dispensation, we'll talk about the politics behind it a little later. But and that's how Tiffy Barnes and company played in the Joburg area, and then in Cape Town they had Dougie Carlson, and I think it was Howie Bergens. I think Dev may have played in Eastern Province, and of course in Durban it was Baboo Ebrahim, and he turned up with that fantastic performance. So I think I said it to you in our last show that people who actually stand out are the ones who can raise their game when it matters the most. And you have to put that down to this one opportunity. You didn't bowl in the first innings of that, call it the unofficial test match. And when you do get the ball in the second innings, you actually bowl your team to a remarkable win. And that was a great, I can only imagine, and I'd like Dev to come in here, because here was the situation in South African cricket and in South African sport where people of color were almost downgraded or degraded, and that they weren't good enough. And here this fellow comes and he turns the tables, and the South African teammates were diving him down because, and I'm absolutely sure there's some footage. And that was a great moment for all players of color in any sport, because here against an international team was a player who now suddenly comes and proves that this is what you've been missing for a number of years.
Yeah, Dev, sorry, I think, go ahead.
Before we get to that, I just want to come back and point it out for the clarification and interest of Ravi with his West Indies background, and I've been there now 4 times, for the CPL. When Aslam spoke about the fact that Ran Kanai, we bowled against him, there was a period in Sakbok where each province had a West Indian playing for them. So I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Correct.
So we had Keith Barker. We had Keith Barker who came out in Natal. Down in Port Elizabeth or Eastern Province, we had a chap called Duncan Carter who didn't play for too long because of an injury. And Western Province had John Holder, who later became a top umpire. So that was the period where we had West Indians. And remember, we were playing against these guys and we didn't have helmets at that stage. We were playing without helmets. And I remember bowling to Rawan Kanai in 2 matches, and in both matches he got hundreds against us. And he was in his 40s, I think, at that stage. And we stood there, and I remember the first delivery. I always admired, or I backed myself as a fielder, if not in gully. We out in the covers. And Jeff France, who was probably our leading bowler at that stage, came steaming in the very first ball. There were Bravo Jacobs, Jokes Bakmaria, myself in the covers, and Jeff France bowled him a magnificent first delivery, middle and leg. All he did was to rock on his back foot and flicked it, and there it went. Just never left the turf. And we looked at each other and we thought, well, now we know what we're in for.
Yeah, lovely.
I want to talk a little bit about the visiting Australians. We spoke a little bit about Richie Benaud, and from what I remember he picked up 2 vital wickets in one of the matches. One of them was Mike Dennis, who is a formidable batsman in his own right, to name a few. What is the impact of Baboo playing in that match, firstly? And secondly, what was the feeling after here's a guy that comes straight out of left field, completely unexpected sort of package that comes in and performs sublimely against some formidable opposition? What sort of meaning did that sort of present in a manner of speaking?
Let's just connect the fact that it wasn't an Australian team; it was an international wonders team. So we had New Zealanders, we had Glenn Turner, we had John Shepherd, we had Martin Kent, we had Bob Taylor, we had a mixture of players who came out. How he actually performed, because speaking from personal experience, we were thrown in at the deep end, and we had no idea, what was happening on the other side, and therefore to actually expect players to perform during that period. You've got to place yourself in the context of what we're talking about. At that time, with pressure from everybody, pressure on you, walking onto a stadium where you grew up, in my case in George's Park, and you never thought you'd ever put your foot on the turf to actually play there. When the ball was thrown to me by Eddie Barlow, guess who was at the crease? Ian Chappell and Greg Chappell. So to be able to come from nowhere and to be given the ball and to say, right, there you go, you made of. So we did as best as we could, and I think we all came out of it commendably well. And for Baboo to have done what he did in the later game was absolutely just phenomenal. And that sort of justified the fact that we then felt that all of us were good enough to be competing at the highest level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll turn towards you, Aslam, in this regard as well. We knew more or less what the national reaction was as far as the black community goes, the cricket fans that were watching the Dadabaya Cup, the Howard Bowl. I'm sure it must have had significant meaning for them. What sort of meaning would you say was sort of transpired with the international community? Hearing the likes that Mike Dennis just went out to a black spinner. What sort of reaction do you think was experienced at the time?
I think all the guys, I don't have all the details, or perhaps I should have just looked up that particular tour to see, because all these chaps were as I said, pushed into the team. And I know that even a chap like Howie Bergens, the one thing that stood out about him was he wasn't penetrative because he was bowling against a good class of batsmen. Martin Kent was also amongst them, and he was a top dog in Sheffield Shield cricket and just breaking into Australian cricket. There was Max Walker and Dennis Lilly as well. So this was a formidable lineup. And what stood out for him, if I remember well, was that at one stage, I think Barlow bowled him from one end for an entire spell, and his work rate was something quite extraordinary. We spoke about Tiffy Barnes's reaction against Dennis Lilly when not much was expected, and whilst everyone folded around him, he actually scored what would sound a modest score of 32. But the pressures that Dev is talking about, here you are in the cauldron of the Wanderers. You're not even supposed to be playing there, because as I told you guys that there was an Afrikaner selector who said that after having lost to the Wanderers team, that they will not select any of these black players again. And of course, Barnes then came out and showed that he had more bravery and tenacity facing the great bowler, who had then Dennis Lilly, who had then taken 7 for 27, I think it was, and he came through. Dev Das himself, and I think Dougie Carlse, I'm not sure. Dougie Carlse was the footballer. I'm trying to think of the name. They all seem to come through quite nicely. But just to talk about Baboo, I think I think for the people who played before Baboo, and then of course Dev's contemporaries will have said, well, we told you so. And then it's like, this is what we've been trying to tell you, play mixed sport, and this is what we can prove. So I think from that point of view, without a doubt, the impact was great. So much so that Baboo was then given a few offers to actually play in clubs within the white leagues at that time, because remember at that stage there was this merger, as we'll call it, and he ended up playing for Collegians, I think, and played very well for them. So his impact was obviously felt at that stage. And as I said, there was a political side to it as well. There's maybe a second side to the Baboo Ebrahim story, which we'll talk about. But here, with the focus on what he had done on that particular day, was quite phenomenal. I think where Dev can come in, and I'll hand it over to him, is that we keep speaking about just that one afternoon at Kingsmead, but there was a lot more to this guy, because he played for almost 50 provincial matches, and he was always the star of the show. As we've just heard, that teams used to look at that list, and if Baboo Ebrahim was there, you were already almost on the back foot. And Dev perhaps can tell us about that time, that period, and what it meant for not just for the rest, but even himself.
Yeah, I think it's let's leave the international wonders part of that. That's just one game, and I think people
Yes.
remember him for that particular game. I remember him for much more than that one game. I remember him for what he did for Natal cricket and what he meant in an era. But what strikes me and what didn't happen in South African cricket when we actually first emerged back into international cricket was the fact that captains had confidence in spin bowlers. And unless a captain has a confidence in spin bowlers, you won't have spin bowlers succeeding because they're not given enough opportunity. Baboo Ebrahim was fortunate to play probably under one of the best captains that has ever had. Initially, he had Gopal Manikam, who himself was an outstanding off-spin bowler, and he backed his spinners. And we had those type of captains, Flip Sneyman down in Port Elizabeth, who would give me the ball and say, you know what your role is and you know what we expect of you. Therefore, spinners were coming through the ranks. And Baboo's impact in a team where, because he was bowling so well, it also encouraged your fielding side. So therefore, you had, in the Natal side, you had great slip fielders. You had Jagu Govinda. You had Yunus Randri, who Aslam mentioned, who was close in. You had Mustafa Khan. All those people, without them, a spin bowler cannot succeed. And therefore, it has an impact on the entire team. You had Michael Patrick coming in from the one side, a left-arm seamer who would swing the ball both ways. And therefore, you've got a left-arm spinner on the one side, Michael Patrick operating from the other side. You can imagine, that the opposition will now try to work out where are we going to get our runs. And therefore, Baboo Ebrahim's impact on Natal cricket extends far beyond his role against the international wonders. Because for years thereafter, he was a stalwart. He became a recognized South African left-arm spinner. In the same breath as you would say Lefty Adams, Owen Williams, Parshuraman before that in Natal, you would mention Baboo, and Baboo stood out. And also more than that, his team ethic was so strong that not only did he play the game, he loved the game. And that just showed the minute you met him. Of course, when the match started, there was this very, very competitive side to Baboo. But off the field, he was just, as Aslam said, the word is jovial. And prankster of note. Obviously, there's so many pranks that we cannot even talk about here, as Mustafa was relating to me earlier this afternoon. And Baboo, when he arrived in Port Elizabeth, we had the famous Alabama Hotel. I think that hotel lit up because Baboo Ebrahim was in town, and together with the teammates that he had, and the Alabama Hotel was a stone's throw away from the Adcock Stadium where we played. So it was just an amazing that even we looked forward to the Natal team coming because they had a Baboo Ebrahim in the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you guys mentioned what a character he was off the field. A gentleman by the name of R. Candy, who unfortunately is a Liverpool supporter as well, tweeted me a nice little video with in which Baboo is actually bowling to a couple of youngsters as well in the nets, even at his age. And I thought that was quite intriguing. I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, and it seems that he had a bit of a legacy as far as getting involved with youngsters, youth cricket, helping them play spin. He himself acknowledged that playing spin was an absolutely critical and important skill. Could you gentlemen perhaps unpack that involvement a little bit more? How regular was he involved in the coaching setup, in a manner of speaking?
I'd just like to come in here because, as I said, I have spoken to a number of people. And with Baboo, when we last saw him in the 70s in Sackbock cricket, and then, of course, some of the players stayed on, as we call it now, the white side, and others came back to the Seikos side, the Sack B side of the cricket. I hadn't seen Baboo from then till 2000 when Dev and I were sharing the commentary boxes together for Supersport. Dev was speaking in Afrikaans, would you believe it? And I was doing it in English. And Baboo had been watching television at home, and he heard my voice, and he was curious. So he actually came to the ground. And every time I had gone back to the ground for commentary, whether it was a 45 over Standard Bank Cup or whether it was the Super Sport Series, 4 days, Babu would be there. But he'd be in his tracksuit, just out of a net practice, or have driven from somewhere to come there and spend the night, or the whole day basically. And what he would do is sit with me, talk a hell of a lot, reminisce about the past. He was amazed at how much I remembered. And he knew my uncle, and he knew the cousins, and he knew Morris Garda, who are all, and Munir Saleh, all related to me. So we got along tremendously. And he would then allow me to go and do my stint on telly. And when I returned, he'd still be there wanting to talk even more. And that went right on through till recently. So to me, that relationship was pretty special. What I found out today was that he was a mentor to many during club cricket, and this is where the political side of thing maybe we can touch on. Is that for many of us, I would say 90% of people who were playing on the non-racial divide, on the non-racial side of cricket in South Africa, actually went across and became part of that attempt at unity. I keep calling it, because it didn't work. It was an attempt and it didn't work. So, and what he did, amongst many others, when players had come back, and when SACB was formed and came back because it was the right thing to do politically, and the fact that SACOS were very strong in South Africa, Babu stayed on the other side. And you know, the only thing I can, I'm being disturbed by somebody trying to call me, I'm sorry. No, the only thing I can say about that is, and it goes for quite a few others, and I'll name them, is that they put the game of cricket above everything else. They just loved the game so much that, you know what, it didn't matter whether it was politics or religion or anything of that magnitude. They loved the game more than anything. And I mean, here in the Transvaal, leading player was Hussein Ayub. There are a few others as well. In Cape Town, there was the father and son, the Conrads, Dickie and Shukri. Omar Henry, as we know. Dev, obviously, for a while, and then came back and played for EP in the SACB as well. So there were a number of players who came back. Others didn't. And Dev was one, and Babu was one of those. And you know, when you spoke to him, and when you pried that mind of his, and you spoke cricket, and you spoke about that time, you just realized that there was nothing else that mattered for this guy. It was just the ball in his hand, the game, and that's why he was such an intellect, that he was almost gifted to be doing what he did. So you actually forgive him for having made that, as we would today call it, that error of his ways, and having played on the other side. But I can't take anything away from him, because he was a fantastic human being. Everybody loved Babu. And we've just read recently now a contemporary of his, who had just maybe come through after Babu had given up, wrote quite a poignant letter or an article about that particular aspect of Babu that perhaps may have clouded his character. But I disagree with that, because at the end of the day, and I must say this, that when we got into 1991, and Dev will tell you, people who were part of rebel tours, guys who had done so much of a disservice to to cricket in South Africa, white guys, they were leading us in the corridors of the UCBSA and even Cricket South Africa. We embraced all of them. We've forgiven everybody else as our country went in that direction through the leadership of Nelson Mandela. So we could forgive all of those guys. Why could we not forgive the likes of Babu Ebrahim? So yes, he did what he did, but his ultimate love was cricket. And right till the end, as an old man with a big pot belly, he was still doing throwdowns to youngsters in nets. So I think that's an important part to mention, and maybe even just to get it out of the way. because that was one part of Baboo that was part of his life, you know.
And sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, I just think that I think Aslam has summed it up, better than anybody could, because Aslam is standing, taking 2 steps back and looking at it, unlike us who are directly involved and were on both sides, let's say. So it's very difficult for us to look at it the way Aslam has, and there will always be those who tend to never want to forgive. But I think that the game moved on, and as Aslam said, everybody reached so many positions in when the merger came, that a lot of us stood back and said, now what's happening here, and therefore. To me, Baboo Ebrahim, when I look at Baboo Ebrahim, I forgot where he played and who he played. I remember Baboo Ebrahim for what he did for cricket. I know what he meant to me. And maybe at this point, I'll tell you what Tiffy Barnes says. When I spoke to Tiffy today, and Tiffy says the following: Baboo was one of our great spinners, of whom we were blessed to have many of. He was a friendly and jovial person, always laughing and joking. I was honored to call him a friend, although he was a fierce competitor. And he said, rest in peace, my friend, and God give you the highest place. And I think this sums up what contemporaries, what his opponents, and what we who played against him believe, that we are now speaking about the human element. We're speaking about a man who played cricket because he had a love for cricket and a passion for the game. And Baboo, they don't come better than Baboo. I mean, it's just something that we don't know what we have lost. And for those who didn't have who weren't blessed to have met him, and those who've never seen him play, and unfortunately, there's not much footage available. There aren't even decent photographs available, of that period. Thankfully, there were some media people who were around, and we tried to get through our scrapbooks, and Andre Woodendal would have done a lot, and Chris Reddy, the people we admire because they have resuscitated our careers, and they've made it known that we have. I remember when we first came back, Aslam, a name would come up on the screen, and you know how irritated I would get when next to the name, and they put statistics, there were blanks. There was absolute nothing next to a person's name. And then I sit there, and then we had commentators who were commentating for South Africa, who were representing the people we worked for, Aslam, for a while, and they were sent out there who knew nothing about our history, knew nothing about our cricket, and they were talking about our players. Well, they couldn't talk anything because they knew nothing about our players. And until Chris Reddy came along and Andre Woodendal, they made sure that next to our names, they might not all be correct figures. Nothing, I played 68, 70 mass tournaments. None of those stats appear. And therefore, stats are half-truths at the moment because they're not complete. But we are grateful for what they have done to make sure that people out there know that actually they did play the game,
I was about to say, I think Christian, the good professor, did a substantial amount of work in that regard. I remember being in Western Province forums where they spoke about that at great length. And I was also going to add that, if there were blanks, at least Aslam would be around in the commentary box to supplement where necessary. I'm sure you would have been 100% accurate as well. Gentlemen, just on that note, very recently, it was cricket's turn to join the Black Lives Matter movement. We've seen what the current players have done in the very recent events in the form of the 3TC event on I think it took place on Saturday, and a week prior, the England versus West Indies test match series in which both sides took the knee. Very recently, again in South Africa, we had former Proteas taking the stance, or perhaps do I call it the other side. What does Baboo's story, his life and times, his experience in the game, mean in the context of Black Lives Matter? And we'll start off with Aslam and then work our way to Dev.
I don't know how to maybe correspond the matter of Black Lives Matter and the life of Baboo Ebrahim. Safe to say that at the end of the day, those former Proteas that made those comments, you felt that even at the time they were playing, they saw the likes of a young, exuberant Paul Adams come through. They saw the workaholic in Tini come through and actually proving themselves. And as the years have gone by, the likes of Ashford Prince and Hashim Amla and so many others that we can name that came through and made a name for themselves, that you would expect that after 26 years, that stereotypical racist agenda and racist thinking will have perhaps got out of their minds. But you almost get the feeling that they wait for moments like this. And for me, the sad thing was that Bhutta had responded in the way he did. And all he needed was then people like, unfortunately, Pat Simcox and others to actually get onto that bandwagon. So in the end, it makes Bhutta look like he was maybe a cheerleader, and that he needed some of these guys on his back, which in essence is not true, because Dev knows him and I know him very well. He obviously has the farm murders issue very close to his heart. I've seen it on Twitter on a number of occasions, and I may even have retweeted or liked some of what he had to say because it must have been close to his heart. But I'll tell you that I've lost a cousin and I've lost a nephew who was shot. And you, Dev and Khalid and every one of us, somewhere or the other in South African life, have lost a family member or a friend or a close associate. So the problem in South Africa is not just farm murders, it is crime. So the problem is not cricket's problem, it's the government's problem. So for a player, for a young guy like Ngidi to just be asked a question off the cuff, what does he think of Black Lives Matter? Think about it. How else would he have answered that question? Because by the time he was asked that question, Formula One had shown their solidarity. So did the rest of the United States, sportsmen in the United States and the whole of Europe and England. And we're seeing it in the in English football and European football, everybody taking the knee. So what was said is that they didn't gauge the time, the mood, the emotion, and to blurt out like that was very, very disappointing. And to maybe take that point further, how the rest of the guys then also jumped onto it and almost seemed to agree with him was, to me, was very sad. And by them having done that, and I'm going to say this, that in South African cricket over the years, and I know Dev Govindjee will agree with me, it has done a disservice to many dedicated white counterparts who have embraced the situation in South Africa. So the likes of Bhutta and company have actually done those people a disservice. Forget the blacks and forget the cricket and forget the work that everybody's been doing for cricket in South Africa. They've done a disservice to their own guys who've worked hard. They almost feel polarized again. It's almost like they have to come into a new dispensation. That's been the impact of what they have done. And really, I wish they can have a look at themselves in the mirror and maybe just think about what they have done, because they've done a disservice to their white counterparts who have been, and I know, very sincere and have tried their hardest. And every time cricket in South Africa takes a step forward, we always hit with a challenge. And on the other hand, Cricket South Africa, in this last 2.5 years, the fact that they've shown no able leadership at any level, and there are respected people in those committees as well who are friends with us, but they need to know that being quiet on one side and not reacting when it's necessary has seen South Africa go through this turmoil. Whatever has happened in Cricket South Africa since middle of last year, in fact, then what is going on now. So it's almost a year since we've had all of these problems with the suspensions and all of that. And with that now, we've got this issue to deal with. So I think it's a tough situation for cricket in South Africa to be. And having said all of that, I'll end by saying that hats off to the likes of Faf du Plessis, Van der Dussen, as well as what's his name, the other Afrikaner. They all made wonderful statements, and that's what we need to see more of in South Africa. And unfortunately, they are put into this invidious situation where they have to suddenly come out and speak about supporting Black Lives Matter on a Sunday, even though they would have done it quietly if it wasn't an issue that was raised, because I'm quite certain that Cricket South Africa would have done something there without a shadow of doubt. So to me, I needed to get that off my chest, because I worked with Pat Simcox. I respected him as a cricketer and a commentator, and I learned from him as well. I'll admit that. And Buddha and I have had long chats together, and we're good friends too. But their timing was very bad, and they didn't gauge the mood of the country and the world.
Dev,
I get proud because it's an Eastern Cape thing when we have the likes of, Gelmandale products of Albiro Peterson and Ashwell Prince being in the forefront of this. And, it's a sad indictment of not only our cricket, but of our nation. And particularly when we go back to cricket. I sat in transformation meetings 20 odd years ago when all this happened. It was transformation meetings after transformation meetings. But then you look back and you realize that people's understanding, you've got to work at it at a different level. When Alviro and Ashwell were saying that Black Lives Matter, nowhere did they say that no other lives, that other lives don't matter. The focus was on Black Lives that matter. And I think that when those individuals that Aslam mentioned took it and changed it to mean that what about this and what about that, nobody's referring to that. That has a place, and Aslam has made it clear. We are all abhorred by the situation of crime. We are all abhorred by gender-based violence. And the focus was clear. And now the stories are coming out. These stories are unbelievable. And to think that you're sitting on a bus next to a teammate and really he's only a teammate because he's on the same team list as you, but he has no other affiliations with you. He's got no other empathy with you. He has no knowledge of your background. I was reading about people who were traveling 3 hours a day to get to a practice, those who haven't had food. And, these things are aspects that we expect a team environment to look at in its holistically. So that when we deal with players, we don't only deal with their playing ability. And then again, I remember when I served as convener of selectors down in my province, and I sadly had to tell a lot of my players of color that you've got to perform 200% because 100% is not going to be good enough. Because if you have 100%, you're going to be dropped, And this is the sad indictment of communities. We thought 30 years later, we're not going to talk color. We're not going to talk these things that Aslam and I talk about now. But sadly not. And we still have a long way to go. And what we need to do is to not stop. Transformation is a process. We said that when we began, and we say it now. And the likes of Alviro and the likes of Ashwell and the likes of whoever else have been in that environment, we've got to sit and listen. And this is what Michael Holding said. You've got to sit and you've got to listen. And if you don't listen, you won't understand. And unless you understand the total picture, you're not going to be able to solve and get to a position where we want you to understand where this comes from and how can we move forward. Cricket has got to move forward. Our lives have got to move forward. It can't be bogged down by this issue because the issue has been out there now in the open and the world has taken the issue. All right. And therefore, I agree with Aslam that we've got to just make sure that that racism, lots of associations are soft on racism. I mean, world soccer to me is a perfect example. There's some countries where soccer shouldn't be played if FIFA was strong enough. Why are they still playing there? When you have them chanting in the stands and doing all sorts of things, they're soft on racism. And we in cricket must, and we in cricket must make sure, right from ICC level, that we're not soft on racism. And we've got to be stronger.
The other thing is, at cricket grounds around the country, we see every now and then on the board when there's a tea break or a drinks break or before play or after play, that Cricket South Africa conforms to the ICC conduct of racism and everything else. So you're reminded all the time, and you wonder with these players and whether they're inside or outside of the fold, and whether there are probably some individuals who didn't make the international or provincial standards, but they're out there speaking. And way back in 1996, 97, I think we discussed this on the last time I was on your show, Ravi, that all these type of issues that we are hearing now of players, how they struggled on buses, and how one punching the other, and the Natal cricket didn't handle it adequately. There were multitude of stories like that, apart from the fact that these poor guys had to come through without food, leaving at 5 in the morning, 3 buses or taxis before they got to the ground, etc. We know all of that. That was identified then. And there was this huge indaba, and I know Devdas was involved because Imtiaz Patel and Andre Odendaal and all of them conducted it all around the country. I think Greg Fredericks was also involved in that. And they then decided that now that we've poured out our hearts, now that our white counterparts understand where we come from our cricketing background and our living background, what the Group Areas Act had done to us, what the Immorality Act had done to us, that we couldn't interact with one another. We need to change because we're in the new South Africa. So hence the Transformation Charter, and then transformation targets, etc., etc. And at that time, again, unfortunately, it's going to be something that's pointing towards the to Cricket South Africa, is that we have to now judge the mood and realize that there's a whole big correction that needs to be done. And at that time, what we saw was leadership with vision and leadership with purpose. And I say that because what did happen in the 90s, here in the Transvaal as it was then, was they started a mentorship program. And I think it happened in the rest of the country as well, where a provincial cricketer or / international cricketer would then adopt one of the upcoming young black cricketers. So you actually live together, do things together, homework together, school, cricket coaching together. And I just saw a video recently where Hugh Page had taken this youngster out to do some fly fishing and spent the weekend with him outside of his home. So this was all to try and make the environment easy for the black or the non-white cricketer to actually blend in and understand what the other side is. But it was always going to be so difficult because of the type of background that you went back to. But those were noble acts, and those were noble moves that were made at that stage in cricket in South Africa. And to a certain extent, I believe that may have helped the situation at that time. And now there's just so much of emphasis on private schools, bursaries to young black cricketers. So when they come through, there isn't an issue of them getting on and getting along with the rest of their counterparts. Is still a problem for me, because invariably, somewhere along the line, whether it's a cricketer, colored cricketer, Indian cricketer, or black cricketer, who'll still say come out of a place like Lenasia, will still need to go through that whole mental change.
Environment.
Yeah.
And guys, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right? So, and I'm very conscious of time here as well. Why did it take so long for these stories to unearth? Why was it? It's almost as though we were waiting for a movement like this one to catalyze these various emotions, to catalyze these various stories. Dev, what are your thoughts around that?
Looking at some of these and reading between the lines, fear seemed to be one of the major criteria. That a lot of the players were contractually bound, it seems. I think they needed a voice. They needed a leader amongst themselves, who could stand up. And maybe they feel at this stage there are enough people, in high positions who will not begrudge them these sentiments, who would give them a hearing. And therefore they have become bold enough. And I think hats off to them, because really you can't be bottling these things up. It affects you as a person. It affects your daily routines. It affects your personality, because you're sitting there knowing that so much has happened, and yet you're not having the freedom to get it out of your system. And what we're seeing now is it's getting out of their system. But what we must be careful of is, and Aslam alluded to this, don't brush everybody with that same paintbrush. There are a lot of people, whites out there, who have done a lot of work to get, to make sure that transformation happens, who are sincere about what they went about doing. And that applies to all the provinces, and I speak particularly for the Eastern Province. And we don't want to disillusion those people who think now that all the hard work that they've done is gone out of the window. What we do want to acknowledge is the fact that there are issues, and these players have been treated badly, seemingly, and therefore we have a right. And it is onus is on us and the people in authority, be they Natal cricket or Gauteng cricket or Eastern Province cricket, that sit down and listen to their stories and then attend to it and make sure this doesn't happen again.
I think from a personal point of view, you mentioned your experiences in this regard, and it sounded very close to home in your playing careers. But as a fan, as a youngster growing up in the time of watching the Makayas, watching the Ashwells playing for the Proteas, this is all mind-boggling stuff to me. I just cannot understand, how is it that none of the fellow Proteas players, the white counterparts, observed that this is unusual behavior, that somebody is jogging from the stadium to the hotel, clearly trying to avoid a circumstance or an issue that's bothering him. Not one person had the decency to actually sit down with Mackay and ask him, "What's happening, buddy? Is everything okay?" At least have a dialogue. Ashwell, to see him break down like that, I've only known him to be a hard as nails batsman, probably one of the toughest I've ever seen play. It was very difficult to get him out as a player. And to see him break down like that spoke volumes for me as well. There was a player, and unfortunately, he was a fringe player, I believe, for the Eagles. I think he ended up going to as far north as Zambia, as far as I'm aware, or Uganda. I think it was Uganda. Sorry, and he found himself a thriving career there because he was earning about a third of the salary that newcomers or new entrants to the game were getting. These small stories are coming out now. How much of an impact do you think these stories are going to have in the next 5 to 10 years, especially on domestic and South African cricket in general, gentlemen? Either one of you can go.
Okay, Dave is D in the alphabet. A will go first.
Yes.
Very quickly, what I will say is that 5 and 10 years is too far down the line. When Ashwell speaks about his brother, who was a better cricketer than him, and he was bagging at number 8 and went to practice sessions and never even get to bat, just bowled, and he was a batsman, a top order batsman. I cry with him as well, because I empathize with him, because I had a nephew that suffered like that as well. He played for South Africa under 15 and under 19. His name is Ahmed Umar. He was a wicketkeeper of note. Even till today, when I meet Mark Boucher, he'll ask me, how's Pussy doing? But that was his nickname. I'll tell you what happened with him. When they came back from an interesting tour of the UK, Butta Tupunar and Ahmed Umar were the only 2 batsmen who got hundreds on that tour. And in that tour was the likes of Ashwell Prince, as well as Neil Mackenzie, Mark Boucher, and a few others. When he had come back here, they were all assessed, and they were graded A, B, C, D, and E. And Ahmed Umar was given an A grade because he didn't even go, and Bob Woolmer told us this before the tour happened, that I've picked this youngster as a batsman, as good as he is, the wicketkeeper he is, because we've got Mazikazana and we've got Mark Boucher. Boucher hurt his finger, Mazikazana couldn't catch the tipping ball in England. Ahmed Umar went to his manager, Mr. Lehman, and said, I'll keep, as a temporary measure. They didn't take the gloves off him for, I think, most of the tour. And then he got 100 in one of the test matches and saved the test. That's the one they drew. when they got back here, and the likes of Makaya and Ashwell and them all did perform quite well. In the Gauteng region, the likes of Mackenzie and the rest of them were taken into the academies. This youngster was left out of the academy. So what was his future? And this was in the under-19 team. He had played in the under-15 team. He had showed potential there. They picked him again. And they didn't pick him because of what he did on the under-15 tour to the UK. They picked him because, and Bob Woolmer did, because he saw what he did during the trials. So it's very close to my heart. And we saw that happen to Jack Munna. We saw that happen to Hussein Munna. We saw that happen to Nazir Dindar. And he was probably the most formidable all-rounder here. In 1991-92, he was the first Indian youngster in the mixed leagues now, in the unified leagues here in Joburg, who got 2 centuries. He played in a whole lot of warm-up matches for Transvaal and Transvaal B, batted at number 8 and whatever the case was. Showed potential there as well. But when it came to the season, exactly what Ashwell said, that most of us, I was part of that B section squad as well, which they had selected. We did absolutely nothing at the nets. And these guys eventually gave up the game at the age of 24 and 25. Iqbal Khan is one of them, although he moved to Cape Town. The guys just decided that there was no future here, that even though we're in a new dispensation, we're not being treated well. So we raise all of this because it's come up again. So 5 and 10 years, Ravi, is not good enough. I wanted to ask Dev what he thinks through his wisdom and time that he spent in the game, not just in South Africa, but around the world. We saw what Imtiaz and them did in the early days towards the close of the last century. What do we do now to address this? How do we not polarize any race group? And how do we embrace and get the cricket on the road again? Because I'm afraid that if we don't, apart from this situation and what's going on in the corridors of CSA, that there may not be a test-playing nation in Africa. I'll say it again, that there may not be a test-playing nation in the continent, on the continent of Africa. That's how gravely I see the current situation.
That'll be so sad at this time, particularly because I match referee particularly a lot in Africa, and I have done. I was with the ICC no longer. But my travels to Africa, you'll be amazed, Aslam. I've been right up to Rwanda and I've been right up to Nigeria. The passion for the game has grown. The stadium they got in Rwanda, Ravi, is one of the nicest stadiums I've been to. It's just unbelievable.
Wow.
And not only among the men, the ladies following for cricket in Africa is phenomenal. All right, and to think and then look upon South Africa as the beacon, because we set the trends. And if our cricket is going to be weak, or if our cricket is going to be weakened, we're not setting any good examples for the rest of Africa. We see Kenya already struggling. Uganda has now appointed a South African as a coach. They want to make strides. They want to. There are so many countries in Africa playing cricket. And what we need to do, Aslam, here is to now build trust. And unless we build trust amongst players and amongst their coaches and amongst the entire concentric circle that goes wider and wider, if we don't have trust rebuilt, we are not going to go forward, because the trust is broken at the moment. And now at the next debt session, the one is going to look at the other and say, how sincere is this guy? You know, can I trust him? We shouldn't be doing that when we get to a cricket practice. We should be going there to practice cricket. We shouldn't be looking at each other and say, can I trust this guy? Or will he be telling somebody else about what I tell him? And I might be telling him something because it's in jest. You know, I might be saying, but then if it's turned around, and we're going to break trust. So players must earn each other's trust, and they must learn to trust the system, and the system must be strong enough so that we can trust the system. And then we're going to move forward.
Just one thing I'd like to add, Ravi, before we cut this off, because if we're looking to the future, what do we do now? We know that cricket is a business. So you're not just going to have to, you can't just have ex-cricketers running the business of cricket. You're going to need these experts from the outside to come in and run it financially. In Harun Lorgat, we had an ex-cricketer, a brilliant ex-cricketer, and a wonderful business brain, and a chartered accountant. You had everything all in one there. So similar to that type of a caliber, we need, if there are cricketers out there, we need to now get cricketers running South African cricket. These presidents and these chairmen that are running boards all over the place, the units themselves need to now go out and look for these type of quality administrators to get them into those positions, and they can run South African cricket, because it is a business. Let's not forget that. And it's because it's a business that the game flourishes at all levels, down, top down, and down to the top as well. So I think that's, to me, one area we need to look at. If you look at Australian cricket, there's been a change in recent years with who's administrating there. If you look at English cricket, look at who are the selectors. Look at who's like Graham Smith here now, Andrew Strauss, and the left arm spinner. His name's escapes me now.
Graham Swan.
Not Graham. No. It's
Giles.
Ashley Giles. Yeah, these guys are at the head of English cricket. And if you look at how they are progressing, it's fantastic. In South Africa, what we'll need to do is marry our unique past and our unique path towards our future, and of course, holistically look at the game as well. And we need to go into an earnest and a real fervent campaign to look for these people to run our cricket. So all the provinces in the next 2-3 months, whilst we're in the off season, that's what needs to happen, because then in the next 2 to 3 years, as they progress through the ranks, they can be nominated at the higher level and serve South African cricket well.
Khalid, a message from Australia.
Yeah, so I just want to leave. I know you guys spoke a lot about Baboo at the beginning of the show and about that era, and also it went into now in transformation and Black Lives Matter, etc. But I want to leave the fans with one positive message that you can give to the young cricketers out there from Baboo's life, from that era, from your experiences, that you can leave with them, that they can take forward into their careers going forward in South African cricket, so we can keep this game alive, because one of our main aims is to keep this game alive in this country. So over to you, Dev, and then we can move on to Aslam.
Yeah, I think that if we take one aspect of what Baboo brought to the game was his intensity and his passion. And everybody might not make it to the top. So when your youngster wants to play cricket, get him to play the cricket. And get from Baboo's life and Baboo's contribution, there's one word: enjoyment. Keep the enjoyment alive. Keep the enjoyment in the game. And then you'd make the game a better game, and you would become a better person.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I don't know what else to add to that. Suffice to say that as far as the youngster is concerned, the love for the game is very important, and it is through that love and passion that you will continue to pursue your goals and keep doing that. And I think the environment that teachers as well as club chairmen and club coaches can create is that continuous love for the game, and then let them not be embroiled in all of this. And as they progress, let them not see the ugly face of racism and color, so that they can hug one another and be honest to one another when they represent their province and their country at whatever level, 15, 19, 21, and even the South African team. I'm still optimistic that if cricket is in the right hands, Dev and I will see a World Cup coming to South Africa in our lifetime.
Okay, so thanks a lot, guys, for both of you for coming on the show. It's a really privilege to have listened to the stories that you have brought, and we will definitely want to get you on the show again in the future if you would like to do so.
What a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Your pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So Ravi, wonderful insights that you drew from the two of them. Unbelievable. I thought it was amazing. Really, for me as a young cricket fan and as a young journalist, aspiring journalist, to listen to these stories, and it really inspires me to want to dig into them more, because there's lessons over here that we can unpack to the world. So Ravi, just for you, last words from you, before we say bye to the fans.
Yeah, thanks, Khalid. And as much as this was a learning experience for you, it was a significant learning experience for me. Earlier in the show, I mentioned that as a youngster, I got to see Makaya, Ashwell, JP. Well, JP and I are actually the same age. But anyways, I got to see them make their debuts. And the squeaky clean image that we see on television isn't necessarily reality. These players experience, as players of color, have experienced challenges beyond all comprehension. And I certainly hope that these stories are being continued, will continue to be told from whomever the sources are. If it's Alviro, if it's Ashwell, the dialogue needs to continue so that Cricket South Africa can respond to these situations and be aware of them so that they never happen again.
So, guys, that's all we have for you today for Legends of Ravi. Obviously, you know what to do. Click the like button, share this video with all your friends and family. Obviously, put your comments in the comment section below and stay safe in this difficult time. So, we will see you again next week with another episode. Thanks.
Bye for now.